Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Today's episode is an interview with the co-founders of Wealthbox CRM, John Rourke and Dan Ferranti. Now, I've known these guys for several years now, and every time we talk, I walk away feeling like I've learned something new about technology. You know, when you interact with most tech vendors, you're only talking to the sales folks, so it's kind of fun to hear from the lead developer, who in this case is Dan, and be able to learn more about the inner workings of technology development. In this interview, we started out by hearing some background on the careers of John and Dan and how they ended up meeting and teaming up for their first CRM development called Upswing. They went on to create a second CRM that was later sold to Constant Contact and have now created their third CRM, which they consider to be their flagship product, Wealthbox CRM, which is a CRM specifically for financial advisors. So I dug in a little bit with Dan on integrations in financial planning, what APIs are and how they work, along with a host of other questions, honestly meant to educate myself and any listeners out there that are curious about technology and really how all of this works. I also talked with John about what he sees as the future of fintech for financial advisors. And then we closed out with a sneak peek of two major applications that they are rolling out called InvestorSay and WealthBase later this year. Now, remember, you can access the show notes and any additional resources mentioned on the show at xyplanningnetwork.com/34. And also remember to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Now, this month's shows were brought to you by Wealthbox CRM, which is a technology partner of the XY Planning Network. Designed for financial advisors, Wealthbox is simple, beautiful, and a collaborative CRM. As their tagline says, Wealthbox is a CRM you'll actually enjoy. Start a free trial in 30 seconds at wealthbox.com. So without further ado, here's my interview with John and Dan. Hey, John and Dan, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Thanks for having us, Alan.
This is great. Thanks for having us.
So, and just so we know, the first voice is John. The second voice was Dan. Listeners will get very accustomed to it rather quickly. So John and Dan are the co-founders of Wealthbox, which is where most folks know you guys from, because that's kind of the most recent addition to the financial planning world. But I kind of want to take a trip back in time just a little bit, because I think it's always interesting to hear how people's careers kind of lead them to this place. So John, I guess we'll start with you. What has been your career path that kind of led up to the point to where you and Dan started working together?
Sure. I've been in the tech space all my life. And in 1995, I got into the internet web scene and have been here ever since, doing lots of different things, whether it was consulting and building websites and apps for other companies. But in the last 10 years, it's building 12 years, actually, it's building web products on our own and all that kind of thing. And about 8 years ago, Dan and his buddy Alex were down in a little basement building Upswing CRM, a financial advisor CRM. This is back in, Dan, I guess it was 2006, 2007. Is that right?
Yep.
So one thing led to another, and I was in New York City, and I had a bunch of people around me in a big loft down in Soho, and we were just building anything. You know, it was this, after the .com1 explosion, another technical friend of mine and I got together and we just said, wow, this isn't over. There's going to be a whole resurgence of this. So we started building apps and met Dan, and they were well underway with Upswing, at least the first iteration of it. And one thing led to another. Said, gee, this is interesting. Why don't you come down to the loft? And I'll put some money into this and provide some guidance. And I got more and more involved in it. So we kind of really formed the company Upswing CRM LLC. So this is back, as you can imagine, in a different day and age, if you will, terms of what was going on then. But that's how Dan and I met.
So Dan, how did you get into, I guess, programming and app development, that sort of thing?
So I've always been in technology and programming since I was a teenager. I've been programming. I just enjoyed it. Back in the .com1 days, 1999, I was down in Reston, Virginia, D.C. area, and I was working on one of my first startups. We were a managed service provider, so we were actually streaming live desktops through the web. So they were originating in the cloud, and we were streaming desktops to people. And that was great. We had a really great experience doing that, and I really just saw how much I enjoyed the software as a service platform. And then, around 2006, 2007, I connected with a buddy of mine, as John mentioned, who was in the financial world. And we just saw the lack of CRMs, right? There were desktop-based CRMs at the time, but no one was really providing a web-based CRM solution at that point in time. People were still asking the question, should a CRM be web-based or should it be desktop-based? And so we started off with Upswing, as John had mentioned, and we really had some good success with it. Joel Bruckenstein named us Rookie of the Year back in 2006, and it was a really great product that was coming to be. And then we connected with John, and from there, John brought his skill set and everything he had with the modern technology and development approach that we brought to things, and kind of continued on. But to this point, for 7 years now.
It's awesome because if you think back, when you say web streaming of desktops, we think about that now. You just log on to join.me and no big deal. We can see other people's screens, and you pick up an iPhone, you can FaceTime. It wasn't like that 15 years ago.
No, we were. It was a very difficult thing back then. We were getting down and actually compressing the protocols, that would send the data from the cloud down to your desktops on our own with our own algorithms, because we needed to just eke out every bit of performance that it would actually work well over, DSL or a fractional T1, or even people, back then still would use dial-up and would stream these desktops over a dial-up connection. So that really has kept us always thinking about performance and the speed of a page load, right?
Well, and also to be looking at if that was 15 years ago, and they say technology doubles, every 5 years or whatever it is, where are we going to be in another 10 to 15 years, especially in financial planning? Because, I'm the first to say just how far behind we are as a profession, as an industry. And we'll talk a little bit about that on this show, but it's exciting to see just how big of a change, from when Upswing was Rookie of the Year in 2006, 2007, like how far we've come in just 10 years. So, and again, if we take a step back just 10 years ago, even today, 50% of advisors don't have a CRM. I can only imagine what the numbers look like then.
Yeah, it was interesting. And to be fair to the people who were out there with web-based CRM systems, obviously, Salesforce was there, Redtail was a great pioneer in the space, and some others. But it was a fun time. It was a fun time, and it was also a crazy time because, as you can imagine, 2008 and 2009, when we really created the company, did a big redesign, started to rebuild the product and get out there, those were very bad years. So with Upswing, a lot of LPL advisors were coming onto it, and corporate called us up and said, "This is interesting, let us come see you." So a whole group from LPL came down to the loft in New York City in Soho and wanted us to integrate it into BranchNet. So we did this pilot program, and that was all great, and a lot of LPL advisors seemed to love it. The big problem was in the background, though, that the world was collapsing. The financial world was collapsing in 2008 and 2009. And we had gotten our feet wet enough as a team with the CRM world, and we all kind of had a better idea, which was making CRM social. So what we did effectively was orphan Upswing CRM. We put a feature freeze on it. We continued to support it and support the customers that were on it, but we put a feature freeze on it. And I took the employees and the capital, and we regrouped the entirety of it, and we created a new company called Bantam Networks. And we had a quote, social CRM product called Bantam Live. And we'll talk about in a second, I suppose, but just parenthetically, what happened with Upswing was we literally just laid it to rest about 2 months ago. We took the remaining customers that we had always supported and transferring them over to Wealthbox CRM. But Bantam Live was really targeted. It was our second CRM system that we built, and was really targeted to small to medium-sized businesses. And the dynamics of social CRM were such that we would integrate Bantam into Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. So with one click, you could create a new contact record and note history from social networks. And the other element of social CRM as it applies to that product and Wealthbox today was the activity stream. So you could collaborate as you do in a private social network among your team in the activity stream. So you'd see, new tasks and calendar events and notes recorded, and others who had permission to see that could comment that and collaborate on that.
It's really interesting because I think that for the business owners that are out there, people that are looking at starting a business, I think there's some really interesting nuggets there just from a business owner, entrepreneur perspective to be able to say, hey, upswing's been great. It's working, but ultimately maybe right product, wrong time, whatever it is, to be able to pivot like that. And pivoting is really hard once you're in it because you feel so invested in what you're building. But what ultimately drove the decision to not just, I guess, iterate on upswing? Why not just make it a social CRM? Or did it really require a total rebuild based on what you were seeing?
It's a really good question. And I don't use I'm obviously familiar with the term pivot, but this wasn't a pivot, right? I wouldn't pick that metaphor. It was really switching horses, meaning we created a whole new company. We restructured both companies and decided to move on. And, to this day, I don't know if that was a good decision or not. I admire Redtail, and I've told them this much even on stage that, hey, they soldiered on during that difficult period. And to be sure, they started a lot earlier than we did back then. But, it was just a difficult period, but we just made a gut judgment that there was a much bigger CRM and market in the small to medium-sized business, and we were first with so-called social CRM. I mean, TechCrunch wrote an article about us called, Bantam Live CRM, the ultimate social CRM. And this was fully 1 year.
Ooh, nice.
This was fully 1 year before Salesforce launched Chatter. And so, we're kind of ahead of the game with it, partly through skill, partly through luck. And the product really took off. So Bantam Live, we started it and sold it in a 2-year period. We had 2 publicly traded companies vying for it after a thorough vetting. And the winner was Constant Contact up in the Boston area. And we literally sold it to them about 5 years ago. Next month, it'll be 5 years.
So the switch was not just, so it's not like you pivoted in the financial planning space. You really got out. With Bantam, you really got out of the planning space, went small, medium business, kind of changed this landscape. And it sounds like part of it is using upswing almost as a pilot to see what the market was and to see where the weaknesses were, where the gaps were in the market. And the gap that you exposed was, hey, we need to do this social CRM, but maybe not just for financial advisors. But did you get traction in the financial planning space with Bantam, or that was just totally outside, did not, intend to get any traction?
No, we didn't. It wasn't directed at all in the financial advisor space like Upswing was and like Wealthbox now is. It was purely a SMB product, small to medium-sized businesses, and it competed with Salesforce at the larger level for their small business product and Zoho and 37 Signals High-Rise and so forth.
Okay. So why, after you sold this company to Constant Contact, why come back to the planning space? What was it about kind of the financial advising space that attracted y'all to come back to it?
It's a great question. And the short answer is it was just, we sold off. Dan went on to work for Constant Contact for a couple of years. I kind of fooled around for a year, figuring out what to do next. And when we looked back at the financial sector that we had started with in Upswing, we just looked back and it just looked like a wide open field, meaning there were legacy products in there. I wrote a blog post some months ago called The Ultimate List of 25 CRM Systems for Financial Advisors. Now, obviously, that's wonderful search engine optimization juice there, and it plays very well. In fact, it goes back and forth with Michael Kitzis's The Best CRMs.
Oh, nice.
In the space. It just looked like it was a wide open field, meaning there are legacy products with old technology and, quite frankly, a lot of old managers who, we're just running these things and they're converting over from desktops. And by then we were really matured, not only in CRM, but matured in creating software as a service products using the latest modern tools and marketing techniques and all of it. And we just don't see that around in the CRM space, quite frankly. And the new fintech folks, the Wealthfronts and Betterments of the world, you can take or leave their products, but they've got wonderful, great teams there, whether on the front end of marketing or the back end and engineering. And we kind of put ourselves in a similar category of using modern tools, techniques, and practices to run our company. And so we just thought that there wasn't only opportunity to go build our third CRM system in the space, but there were other products too. So the name of our company really is Starburst Labs. And our flagship product is Wealthbox CRM, but we're also launching later this year another product called wealthbase.com, which is an inbound marketing network for financial advisors, and another product called InvestorSay, InvestorSay.com, which will launch around April. And that is a social network for investors.
You know, what I remember hearing, and I can never remember the guy's name that said this, but he was a keynoting at a conference, and he said that his job was basically to be a technology futurist, was his job, to basically tell people where technology was going. So his strategy was he would go to South Korea once a year to their technology convention. He'd see everything that they were producing there. He'd come back to the US and act like he could see the future, tell everybody about all the technology that was coming in. Sure enough, about a year later, anything that was being created in South Korea appeared in the US, and he looked like a genius. And he was saying this in jest about, you know, being able to kind of see in one area and then take that and apply it to another. And I feel that way a little bit in financial planning because of how far behind we are just in general technologically, and that, you know, by going into other spaces, especially with technology, and being able to see kind of what other industries, other professions are utilizing and bringing that back to financial planning, you almost can't bring in the same level of technology some other industries have because it's too much. So why, in your opinion, and I guess I'll hear from both of you on this, just from the technology as well as the business side, like, why is financial planning so far behind technologically? And do you agree with that statement that we are behind technologically?
I don't know. You know, I was asked by the Market Council Summit, this is John speaking, I was asked by the Market Council Summit to give a presentation along with some other panelists last month. And the name of the presentation was, it was part of their technology disruption session. I mean, disruption to me is an overused and almost trite word now. But the name of my presentation was An Outsider's View. You know, we're outsiders to this industry. You know, there's a big phrase in the industry by a lot of apps, right? It's built by advisors for advisors. And I've always viewed that as giving short shrift to the art, craft, and science of developing true software as a service products. And I just don't think there are many advisors out there, and there are some exceptions, but I don't think many advisors out there are going to moonlight their way toward, you know, success in building apps on the side over here. It's just a little strange thing. And it gives, it kind of shortchanges what we all do here. So
sure.
That's why we're in the space. But what I said on stage there was that the industry tends to disadvisors. Right? There's this whole industry, if you will. In a riff on an Eisenhower phrase, I call it the CRM industrial complex, where you've got, you know, self-styled CRM experts, you've got CRM consultants, you've got CRM training organizations and CRM trade show promoters and trade publishers, you know, writing up ad sponsors articles on how, quote, non-savvy advisors, you know, should use CRM. And the reality is everyone's making money off of this. And I think the industry, I think the advisors should turn around and saying, hey, give us better product, right? Because we're kind of blaming the advisor for being so far behind. And I think it's beholden on the vendor community. And we're not perfect, but we're trying to do that, to give advisors, no matter what their age, tools that intuitively make sense to them. Because if you're going to go try and, you know, have a profit center for making training off of CRM, well, then you're probably disregarding user experience design. Right. So again, we're not saying we're the solution to all this, but that's our mindset, is that don't blame the user, don't blame the advisor, develop better products for them. So a little twist on maybe the way you phrase your question.
No, I like that.
Yeah.
And Dan, so just from a purely technological, I guess just this is, I guess my ignorance will come through in terms of how to actually use, the correct language to use, but just from, I guess, the back end technology and programming, are our systems as far behind as they appear? I mean, just from, you know, a usability standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really starts with, I think there was a gap, right? There was, and it's closing, but there clearly was a gap in the technology that the small business market generally gets and what advisors get. And advisors wanting to run their practices efficiently said, hey, we have to fill this gap. So what are we going to do? Let's build software to do that. And there's a lot of homegrown software, and that software, some of it turned into products, and some of them are great products, and you know, and some of them haven't been as successful. But that's where the design by advisors for advisors has come from, right? So now you have a technology operation that you're running, and you're running your advisory practice. There's a lot that's behind the software side of things, right? We've matured as a software technology, you know, industry over the past 10 years in huge amounts, like you said earlier, Alan. And it comes down to things on the front end, like user experience. User experience is a huge term. It's everything from it goes way deeper than make this, this should look pleasing to the eye and pretty. Of course, that should be in your software, but there's other things beyond that, like fatigue. When you perform an action over and over again, let's say you're adding follow-up tasks to clients, the amount of clicks that it takes to do that, right? That's user experience. The workflows in your system and making sure that it's easy to go from one action across to another action that you commonly do. User experience. How pleasing it is to the eye? Yes. So those types of things, it takes years to get good at that craft, right? You have to focus on that with 100% of your time, day and night, weekends, and do that, right? That's on the front end. On the back end, there's the technology that runs your software. Are you a cloud-based technology utilizing the most advanced and secure services that are out there so that you can deliver interesting features to advisors that help their practice? It's very hard, I think, for organizations, unless that is 100% their focus, to do that. So yes, I do think there's a gap, and I think there is a lag in the industry for things like usability and providing those modern development practices that translate to newer features for advisors, interesting things that they didn't realize were even possible, and making sure that they have a consistent and reliable application. So that's how we approach things. That's where we like to come from. And we really enjoy being here right now and being able to do that.
Makes sense. And, you made the comment that the gap is closing, which is so exciting for those of us who like to just play with technology because it's fun. But I'm a believer in the basic laws of economics and supply and demand, and that, from the demand side, I just wonder if we haven't had the demand for new technology because of just the age of our profession. The average age of advisors pushing up into their upper 50s now, the tendency to run more lifestyle practices than actual businesses. As Michael Kitces would say, people are basically building incomes. They're not building enterprise value. And so they're just not demanding these things because ultimately they're fine. Are you seeing that the older advisors are just not interested in new technology? It's kind of what they've got's working, so it's fine, and it's the younger advisors that are really pushing it? Or is that just a really bad generalization based on some anecdotal experiences I've personally had?
I don't know. I mean, I understand the point, and I don't necessarily disagree with it, but sometimes it surprises us, the age of some advisors coming onto Wealthbox CRM, for instance. And everyone kind of assumes, this is for the younger set because it's so modern and slick and it feels like a social network. The reality is we get a lot of people commenting that their older users in the firm are using it. We've got people in their 70s and 80s using Wealthbox. So I don't know the answer to the question. I understand the larger dynamic of where the business is and the average age of an advisor. But I think part of the lack of demand, perhaps, as you're suggesting, may be that the products heretofore have just been too complex. And there's an argument to be made there, too.
It's a good point because, a program like Salesforce is great in the sense that it does all things for all people. And for anybody that listens to this show on a regular basis, the word niche market comes up in every single episode, because if you serve all people in all ways, it means you serve no one truly. And so, it's almost like we went through this period of like all these kind of more broad-based programs, and now we're starting to get the more niche-based focuses, because it's like, it's great to have something you can fully program for yourself, but good Lord, where do you start, and how much are you going to have to pay to actually get it where you need it to be?
That's right.
So where are you kind of seeing the focus, I guess, in the financial planning technology space changing? Are you seeing more vendors coming into the space that are interested in helping to close this gap, that are being a little more forward thinking, or are you seeing existing vendors really looking to shake things up, or just kind of a mix? What's your pulse on the market right now from a technology standpoint?
Well, I think it's thriving. I think the older vendors are upping their game, to the benefit of advisors. I think newcomers like Wealthbox and others are coming in to offer more choice and more possibility for advisors. So I think there's a real energy in the business, right? 3-4 years ago, I didn't see it. When we started this business, we kind of looked around. It was the same kind of somnolence around. And I think, some of the hot fintech companies, whether it's the robo-advisors or some other, companies in the space with really new products have given it extra life. And our mission this year is to really integrate with a lot of these new entrants and new providers or companies that have just upped their game in general.
So let's talk about integration, because I think that this is a buzzword that I'm so sick of hearing the word integration simply because it doesn't mean the same thing to all people or to all products. So just on the front end, advisors are always asking for integrations. And sometimes I think we ask for way too many integrations because we end up with integrations that don't actually help our lives at all, but it makes us feel good to have the integrations. But why is it so challenging to build integrations? Why can't you is it not as easy as just kind of plugging into all of the various technologies out there? Is it a really big deal? Does it depend on which vendor you're integrating with? Can you just talk, I guess, more of an education standpoint of just what it means to integrate with other providers?
Yeah, I'll start the answer to this, and Dan will definitely have a good answer to this too. But it's kind of funny. It's interesting. Now that we've built 3 different CRM systems over the last 8 years, in this last one with Wealthbox, advisors really understand more how we work, meaning advisors understand the plasticity of web-based software. They know that they can ask us for a feature request, and they know we can do it technically, right? So we have this very triaged process of handling every single request and cataloging them very fastidiously, and then they go through a couple of other tools and Trello and all this kind of stuff that Dan can go over. But what's challenging for us is, getting pulled in different directions. So we have to combine, the voice of the customer and what they want, and we have to combine our vision, and then we have to look at partners and what they can give us to create more value in our product by making it more valuable, but also giving us distribution from a marketing point of view. So it's a really challenging effort. And what we have said was, and we were cautioned by lots of people like Jason Wank, who came on right away, and we knew this. We cannot we cannot mess up our user experience just because we have integrations, right? So we see other vendors, coming in there. You'll log into their products, and all of a sudden you've got a bunch of integrations that aren't live yet, but you're wasting valuable real estate just to accommodate those someday. We just don't want to do that. We believe in more of a progressive disclosure approach. If you're integrating with someone, they shouldn't be right there the second you sign on for a free trial, for instance. I think that's odd. But Dan, do you have any thoughts on this on more of a technical level?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from a feature standpoint, there is a curated approach to making sure that that an advisor gets the integrations they need, but we're also not making the system so complex that they can't even find, what they want to do in Wealthbox. But that this definitely is a big year for us from an integration standpoint. And I think it really starts when you get to the technology level. It starts at the APIs and how modern and friendly the integration partner is, right? Like we have integrations that we've done in Wealthbox that have taken us 3 hours, like very fast, one engineer, an afternoon, and can actually produce a meaningful integration for an advisor. And meaningful comes in all different flavors, and some things are very simple but super helpful for an advisor, like a single sign-on, launch into another platform. It saves an advisor having to retype username, password, go to a URL and go log into another platform. Like that kind of stuff is helpful on a small scale, but there's also larger stuff that we want to do. And it can be really hard if the other partner does not have, let's say, an open API, or they have an outdated or legacy API that you have to work with. And as an engineer, myself, when I see an API that's is outdated or returns different results than the documentation states, it makes things harder, right? It makes it much harder to integrate with them, and it slows down the process. And that's why some integrations take much longer, or some integrations just aren't as seamless as you'd like them to be, because there are challenges connecting with APIs. And Alan, I think you asked, why can't there be this turnkey approach? And people have tried to do that in the past, but there's so many different pieces of data, and there's no common data standards around certain things in any industry, but in fintech. So data models behind the scenes are different between different providers, and all of those things need to be mapped together and synchronized in different directions with different rules.
Now, let me ask you this. You mentioned API, Open API, Legacy API, and I think that is a term that gets thrown around a lot. And I don't even know what API stands for. I kind of know what it does. So for listeners, what is an API? I mean, why is that important for integrations?
Yeah, totally. So an API is an application programming interface. And what that means is it's a way for one engineer, one firm, software platform to communicate with another software platform over programmable terms, right? So a user can go and access Wealthbox and request data from Wealthbox in a format that they can then program against, right? That's kind of the fundamental core to the API. And we're actually releasing our API for Wealthbox 2.0 towards the end of January, coming up soon here. And it comes down to making sure that those APIs are consistent. That's one of the biggest problems in the market today. As I mentioned, some APIs, you access them, they're not even open. So you have to contact a vendor and say, hey, we'd love to integrate with you. Can you provide us access with your API? And some legacy APIs, older APIs will actually provide you with a PDF file or Microsoft Word document, which contains all of the API information. So how another engineer can access it, and pull down data, right? So it could be, hey, in Wealthbox, we would like to retrieve financial account data and bring it into the Wealthbox platform. So as an advisor, when you're viewing a client record, you can also see the client's accounts and holdings from some other system, right? So the way that we learn how to go and get that could be, again, as a Word document that's emailed, but it could be as modern as what other industries are doing, which is a website that an engineer can go to and view all of the documentation, so they know exactly how to get the information that they need to, so that they can display those account values and holdings inside of the service. And we are definitely way skewed towards the other end. We can talk about maybe a little bit our documentation-driven API, which we're building, because we want to solve those problems that exist in the market, because ultimately that just makes an advisor's life better, right? The better an API is, the better the features will be for the advisor that's using the product.
I thank you for that explanation, because that actually helps to kind of just understand why integrations, one, are a challenge, and two, I think it kind of highlights maybe the change in attitude in financial services in general over the last, I'll say, couple of decades, and that we're starting to see even more so now, which is kind of this movement away from this high competition mentality to more of a collaborative, what I call the abundance mentality, which is really what drives XYPN's community in general, is this belief that, hey, there are so many people out there that need our help. We're not competing against each other for individual clients, so we can help each other. And so when you're talking about APIs, sounds like an API is basically just the access to be able to integrate with other systems, which I would suppose most software vendors in this space want to be able to integrate with other vendors. But the question is whether or not they've made it open or not. Open being anyone can come in and integrate anytime they want, do it very easily, but maybe they lose control, versus having an API that they control. They can basically decide who gets to partner with them, possibly play favorites, decide what, kind of what the integrations will be going forward. And it seems like most of the newer companies that are coming onto the space, many of which, XYPN has partnered with, like Wealthbox, Advisor Financial Planning Software, Precise FP for data gathering, have open APIs, but I don't really see open APIs from more legacy companies that have been around a while. Is it just that it's really hard to build that kind of API on legacy systems, or is there more of a maybe kind of two schools of thought when it comes to technology? Maybe kind of have the old school technology stack that operates the way they always have, and kind of the new school technology stacks that, that's more operating like Wealthbox is.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, when you go into the kind of the broader market, into the small business space in general, every application, that we ever work with in Wealthbox, they have an open API. All of the internal vendors that Wealthbox uses, we all have it. There's APIs for all of them. It's a given, right? It doesn't matter what you use. So as time has gone on, and as we've gotten here is a software development industry, this is what SaaS companies do. And so any new entrant, I think at this point, the modern folks like us and others that are coming in, It's not even a question, really. It's like that's what you do. You build an open API for collaborative purposes.
On another point, or on this point, I'm open to integrating with other CRM systems, right?
So how does that look? I mean, what benefit?
It's theoretical in part. It's challenging in another, but we just believe in data portability. And the ease with which a customer can leave one CRM vendor and transfer to another, I would like to make really simple, right? Wealthbox would like to make super simple. We don't care if you want to go or we don't, and we're delighted to have you come into the system. So theoretically, we're open to integrating our API into any of our competitors. We're wide open to doing that.
And obviously that's, from a business owner standpoint, you're confident that your product is the best and that people will stay with you, but it makes it easy to leave. And I think that's important. I mean, I always ask, technology vendors before I sign on, how do I leave you? Because ultimately, I'm assuming at some point I will leave every technology vendor I sign on with. No one should be using technology they had 20 years ago. And obviously, as a technology provider, you hope people stay, but how you're going to leave one day is important.
It is. And right now, even without, we're launching this open API in a couple of weeks, as Dan mentioned. But even right now, it's very easy to leave Wealthbox if you want to. And if you need support, we give it to you. You can take your data in XML or JSON, whichever you want. But on the matter of actually integrating with other companies, there are instances when a customer isn't right for Wealthbox, right?
Sure.
And that's okay. We have people come and go all the time. It's quite skewed right now to the coming. But as different advisors move on to different places, there might be another CRM system that's right for them and vice versa.
So to switch gears just a little bit, I mentioned earlier, and I'd have to pull up the most recent statistics. I still think we're at 50% of advisors, say that Outlook is their CRM, which, anybody that knows anything about technology knows that Outlook is not a CRM, but advisors think that that's how they're using it. What is the core purpose of a CRM? As an advisor, if you don't have one, or we have folks that are starting firms that say like, oh, well, maybe I just, won't adopt a CRM, which is one of the reasons we provide Wealthbox for free to our members is to ensure that they adopt a CRM from day one. But why is it important? I mean, what's your pitch to advisors that are saying like, not only is it between, Wealthbox and other competitors that are CRMs, just between Wealthbox and just not using a CRM in general?
Yeah, I think, we kind of were promoting other people's words recently. I think Joel Bruckenstein in Financial Planning Magazine came out in December, just a month ago, on some stats. So I think it was 40% of advisors don't use a CRM. And of that, I think it was 21% are using Outlook as a de facto CRM. So the same point you're making, though. Dan, you can weigh in on this too, but you use a CRM. Most advisors use CRM. For most advisors, CRM is their hub, right? We hear this kind of CRM centricity notion about, and they use it to manage their business. And, so you have your core features in CRM, your contact management, tasks, opportunities, a calendar, workflows, file storage, right? CRM reports. You have all these kind of core functionality. And I think what we've introduced is a humanized nature of a CRM, meaning all the data's there, but what do you do with it now? Well, one, I want to collaborate with my peers on that, right? So Wealthbox is very collaborative with that activity stream and private social network. And two, you want to have proactive notifications coming out to them, partly based on, those integrations that we've got now and we're adding very soon, where you can proactively be notified of something. But to get back to your question you're basically using it to run your business. So, some advisors who are just kind of managing a book of business in this kind of lifestyle way, maybe all they need is a contact manager and some ancillary tools, to be compliant and run their service. But if you're out and you're trying to build a business, particularly with a team, you really want to use a CRM tool to do that. Dan, you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I definitely think, especially Alan, you had mentioned, the XY planning group and even advisors that are either just starting out or continuing to, still in that growth phase, right? They want to grow their practice. They want to grow their business. You need somewhere to put this data. When you, potential client, you have to put them somewhere so you can keep track of that. So you know when to follow up. It would be nice if you have the same tool. So once you've followed up and you've actually established a relationship with that person, they become a client, you can transition them to a client in your platform. And then as you communicate with them, you can add notes when you speak with them. You can attach emails as you correspond with them. You can see their account data in your CRM system. All that stuff is really... It's important because it will allow you to be efficient as an advisor so that you can grow your business faster, right? Nobody wants to do repetitive things or do things in a manual way, especially when you're trying to grow your practice, because that'll just slow you down. So having a CRM will allow you to take advantage of that, right? It'll allow you to do that and really use it as your central platform that you build off of as you grow your business.
And I think this is one of those areas where a lot of new businesses, if you have 3 clients and 2 prospects, you can keep everything in your head. But I remember it was about client 20 when I started losing track of wait, how many kids does this client have? What all outside assets are we talking about? Because, and that's when you go, oh crap, I really wish I had all of that, information sitting somewhere. Because, in financial planning, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, growing a financial planning practice is changing and it is becoming more sophisticated. So historically it was prospect calls you, they sign on, they schedule a meeting, they sign on. That was the sales pipeline. Well, now we're getting much, much more sophisticated in terms of where are they at in your sales pipeline? Have they downloaded your freemium? Are they reading your blog? Do they listen to your podcast? Have they attended an intro webinar? I mean, there's so much that can be going on, and you can use your CRM to track that, to see kind of what's, almost predict future growth based on kind of your sales pipeline and where people are in it. But once they become a client, what are the tasks that you're going to be doing? And you can create, recurring templates and things like that in order to not only streamline and be sure you're actually doing everything you're supposed to be doing, but also for a growing practice to be able to hand things off. It's really hard to bring in a paraplanner one day and say, okay, good luck. If you could write this plan for me, that'd be great. And the paraplanner has no idea how you operate. But if you've documented all your tasks and processes and all of that, it makes it so you can hand off things to other folks and make it, so that you can actually grow your practice.
Absolutely. In addition to giving that consistent experience to every client that you have, which is really nice. You know what you're providing your clients.
Absolutely. And like I said, just storing that data, just storing the history with that client, so that when they call and they say, hey, I have a quick question, you can just pull up their contact record and all of the information is living there. Like I said, I do think there are times when we try to over integrate. And I guess this is kind of the argument with financial planning technology in general, is that we've had some vendors try to be the all-in-one. It's no longer a CRM and a performance reporter and a rebalancing software and whatnot. It's all one single system. And whether or not you can do that really well, it remains to be seen. I'm not sure that anybody has, especially not in the space that our listeners can afford, like some of the platforms that are out there that have, minimum fees of $20,000 a year and such. But, I guess in terms of integrations and making CRM the hub, basically being able to either access enough information or, like I said, with single sign-on to be able to push a button, pop open another system. If a client has a quick question about their portfolio, you don't necessarily need all of that information sitting in your CRM. You just need to be able to access it really quickly.
Yeah. And, just on the business landscape, that's the tension, right? The platform all in one place, all in one solution versus point solutions or separate products that integrate with each other, right? And the fragmentation that we see in the small business market, let alone financial services, of point solutions like Wealthbox CRM that can integrate with A, B, and C company. That's where the industry is still going. You see this desire to create a platform, and I think there is the business case for it, only if you also allow advisors to choose from that platform on an a la carte instead of prefix basis. And so that's where I think is the big business opportunities for a big company to have both of those. Once they try and knit everything up in all of its technological largesse, it becomes clunky and overpriced and misguided at times. So I think your point solutions are here to stay. You see these startups sprouting up just around features, right? And that was turned into products. And that's always going to be in the space, I believe.
It is kind of the evolving nature of technology. And I mean, we're seeing this in I guess the world in general, where Uber suddenly has, completely changed the landscape of getting a taxi and now all of a sudden you can work for a couple hours a week driving for Uber if you so choose, and you can have a bunch of different little jobs that create a big job. In technology, we're kind of seeing the same thing where we see a lot of little pieces that are being created, highly specialized tasks, feature sets, that sort of thing, that then kind of get rolled up into products that create more interesting and more useful things. It's just fun. I think this is a fun time in fintech. And part of it, I think, and again, this is more of an outsider's perspective because I'm not really in the fintech world other than buying it, is that we've started to see some companies getting bought out for really big dollars, whether that be things like eMoney or LearnVest or some of these other companies with multi-$100 million price tags, depending on the platform, sometimes up in the billions. We're now starting to see robo-advisors getting eaten up. And I just wonder if, and maybe you can speak to this because you have investors, if all of the money that's being made in fintech is finally starting to make investors interested in putting more money into the fintech space, which is going to continue to drive new and interesting and useful products. I mean, are you starting to see more money flowing into advisor-facing fintech?
Yeah, definitely. There has been, although now I think we're at a point where people are starting to get nervous just in the venture capital community at large. We're starting to see, articles appearing about maybe these unicorns aren't, a lot of these unicorns aren't going to make it and they're going to turn into donkeys and we're going to have lots of down rounds out there and all that kind of stuff. So to be sure, it's healthy. I think there's a lot of, because financial services was held back for so long, because of regulatory issues, because of technological legacy issues, because of cultural issues, because of managers who didn't understand what young startups can offer. Now you do have, or have had in the past 5 years, this wave of investment into it, the fruition of which is starting to blossom. And, you can argue whether or not, again, whether, Betterment and Wealthfront and some other robo-advisors, or whether their cost of acquisition is too high or too this or that. But those companies can move, because they're very talented, in my view, they can move very quickly. So we'll see what happens with Betterment, their 401k project, and we'll see whatever happens with Wealthfront. But I just think it's for the good. I still think there's money flowing into it. I don't think the baby will be thrown out with the bathwater, meaning if some of these big unicorns falter, I don't think that's going to impede little companies like ours in any way. So I agree with you, Alan. It is a fun time.
And honestly, I would not have wanted to be on the fintech side of things 5 or 10 years ago because I feel like it was a lot less interesting. But now we actually get new technology to go see it at the T3, technology conference that's going to be coming up in February and things like that, which I'm excited to see. As we're kind of wrapping up, you've mentioned, we've been talking a lot about where kind of Wealthbox is today, the CRM marketplace, that sort of thing. You said the open API is right around the corner. When that happens, it kind of sounds like that'll be Wealthbox 2.0. The feature set that you intended to create is kind of there. The core is there. And obviously, you'll always be iterating on it and adding new pieces. But you've mentioned a couple of other projects that you're working on with Wealthbase and InvestorSay. So one, why start, doing other projects? Is that kind of part of your philosophy in terms of kind of creating different apps? And then two, talk a little bit about what those actually are and how they will potentially affect the advisory community.
Sure. When we started Starburst Labs and received funding for it, what I said to the investors was we're going to build 3 separate but highly complementary applications. And the name of those, which is what I said 3 years ago, the name was Wealthbox CRM, Wealthbase, and InvestorSay. So there is a narrative to it in terms of them being complementary. And so I've got this metaphor that I've used that incorporates the conversion funnel and combines it with the technology stack. Meaning, if you look at the top, in 2016, if you look at our company, you're going to see 3 apps in the market. At the very top of that funnel, and also think of a stack, is InvestorSay. And that is going to be community content around investing, investments, and investors, right? So you got a hashtag, a cash tag, and an @ for investors. And that'll be something along the lines of maybe what Morningstar offers its people. It'll be similar, only it'll be an actual social network, vertical social network in the investing space. And editorially, we're going to guide it to get into wealth management issues and financial planning issues and all manner of investing and investments. So look for that. We hope to launch that around April. Below that, if you will, so that's the top of the stack, that's the top of the funnel. Now let's get a little thinner and come down to Wealthbase. Because some portion of those people who go to Investors Say will see ads and promotions and Q&A, question and answer widgets that come from Wealthbase. And Wealthbase, for lack of a better term, is a Q&A, a question and answer exchange that compliantly connects consumers of financial planning information and wealth management questions with advisors. And it's a multimedia platform, so we can do it straight through email, through even text messaging. It can spark, and it escalates up into audio like what we're on right now and goes to full motion video in one click. And forgive me for not fully explaining that, but you get the gist of it. We've already lined up some media partners to place ads in relevant native embedded content. So if you're reading an article about college 529 plans, embedded on that article on a third-party publishing site is, got a question about 529 plans? Advisors are live online now. You can't get any tighter in the advertising world than that.
And John, and one thing to add here too is that as an advisor, when you sign up and join the Wealthbase platform, you can indicate your specialties. So you can say, hey, I would like to receive questions about divorce, or I would like to receive 529 questions, and I would like to operate anywhere in the country, or I would only like to receive those questions within, let's say, a 50-mile range or 25-mile range of my zip code. Then as that question comes in from a consumer that is interested in and needs help, it will geo-target to you as the advisor, and you'll get an alert so you can then go in and have a conversation with that person. It's a private one-to-one communication. So this is not open over the internet. This is just like email in a way. And we have compliance tools that are built in so we can work with your existing compliance email providers. And then that conversation, as John mentioned, can escalate. So you can go over to video or to audio, have a phone call, escalate to video. And that's a great way to form a relationship and get a question answered as a consumer, right? And I have these types of questions all the time. And it would be great to have someone to reach out to like that.
It's almost the ability to test drive a financial planner and kind of filling the top of that sales funnel, which is something that in financial planning we've not been very good at, to be completely honest. I mean, I remember going to FinCon, the Financial Bloggers Conference, for the first time and seeing just how far behind financial planners are in marketing. I mean, if you want to see some marketers, man, go to FinCon. They make 100% of their money online, and so they've got to be really, really good internet marketers. And so, but I look at people like Brittany Castro, who's an XYPN member. We had her on back in episode 18. Listeners can go to xyplanningnetwork.com/18. And she has built an e-course in order to engage with a lot of prospective clients. I'm trying to remember the exact numbers. I think at the time she had over 100 people go through it or something like that. And a few of those had become clients. This is kind of a version of that. It's not a course, but it's a version of that in that it lets a consumer get a question answered. Usually it's something that's really, really stressing them out. Get that question answered, engage with an advisor, kind of test drive what financial planning looks like, and then potentially be able to move on into being a full-fledged financial planning client.
Yeah, exactly. And, Michael Kitces talks about, that no one solved the top of the funnel.
Right.
Right. So we're trying to, get engagements for advisors in a compliant manner. Dan mentioned we have these tools now. We have what we call a supervisor's desk. And it's like a web-based help desk to triage and manage these questions, whether you're at a broker-dealer and you want to do it for your network of advisors, or whether you're at a firm. There's lots of tools around that. So you've got Investors Say at the top, Wealthbase just below that, and at the bottom of this funnel or stack, if you will, is Wealthbox, and some portion of advisors will be in there. Now, we do have coming out in Wealthbox, once we have those products released this year, a new activity stream where you'll be able to see these leads coming in from Wealthbase and claim those questions from Wealthbox, right? So you can start that process. So you can see how all of these products are separate. Mm-hmm. When the time comes, we'd be delighted to integrate with any of our competitors or whichever on Wealthbase. But these are complementary products that cross-promote and even integrate with each other. And that's essentially what Starburst Labs is all about.
Because I think, I remember when I first heard you say that you were going to be getting into other apps, I'm the chase the shiny object entrepreneur. And so I was like, oh no, does that mean Wealthbox is, you're moving away from Wealthbox? But really this was the intent of the company in general, was to create different standalone apps that integrate, but can stand on their own. And if you're a Redtail CRM user and you absolutely love Redtail and aren't moving away from it, you can still use Wealthbase, assuming that integration gets built. And so it's not like you have to use all of Wealthbox's stack, because they are standalone, but obviously there's going to be some pretty sweet integration since you control all of these different platforms to get underneath the same umbrella.
Yeah, definitely. That's the spirit of it. But for my part, I'm pleased with what we set out to do. Right down to the brand names and the product descriptions are the same as they are today than they were when we started the company 2.5 years ago. Do I wish we could, move along a bit faster? We all do. We probably pre-announced WealthBase a bit too early, but we've done a lot of work on it. It's in working prototype right now, as is InvestorSay, by the way. But we'll stage those out, the release of both of those out this year. But by the end of this year, we'll have tested things, and next year we'll be looking for integration partners with those products too.
And assuming that you do the same thing with those products as you have with Wealthbox, it'll be an open API and it'll get really easy to integrate. And we've talked about this offline before, is that when you have an open API and a partner out there has an open API, I can, as someone who does not actually work for either company, I can actually create integrations and links between those two without having to ask for permission, which is kind of cool as well. So it'll be interesting to see as more and more companies are producing apps like yours that are opening up these APIs, that are maybe standardizing the data sets a little bit, just how customizable we're going to be able to make things, which I think is going to be so important going forward.
I agree.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being on today. This was a lot of fun. Get to hear, I guess, the technology side of things. I think many times as advisors, we take for granted what it takes to build tech. And as you pointed out earlier, sometimes that can be a little insulting to the art and science that actually is software development. It's not just throw some money at a problem and it fixes itself, but to also kind of hear where you think as an insider's view of the technology space, kind of where things are going. And I think it's exciting. I think that it's only going to make our lives easier as advisors to be able to serve our clients better and either, serve more clients or ultimately maybe take some additional time off, which is more the route that I push.
Absolutely.
Well, apropos of that, Alan, we've got a blog post coming up that we'll probably put out in February. But you mentioned time and time off. And what we're trying to really show is Wealthbox CRM gives you back time with respect to the amount of clicks it takes to perform everyday actions, which at the end of the year is startling how much time it can take to do that. And it's startling how much time you can save yourself from doing that. So look out for that soon. But we really appreciate being on your show. And congratulations to you and Michael, by the way, on your whole XYPN network. We hear about it all the time, and it's great to see your progress too.
Well, thanks, guys. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I hope this episode was educational for you, since I know it was for me. I think as advisors, we can take for granted technology and how it works and how easy or challenging it is to actually build integrations and just to build software in general that works the way that we need for it to work. So it's fun to get a behind the scenes look at their platform. Now, remember that if you want to ask John or Dan any questions, you can do so in our VIP community, which is free to join at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. And you can also access the show notes and additional resources at xyplanningnetwork.com/34. This month's shows were brought to you by Wealthbox CRM, a technology partner of the XY Planning Network. XYPN actually provides Wealthbox CRM for free to all of its members. It is a simple, beautiful, and collaborative CRM for the modern financial advisor. Start a free trial in 30 seconds at wealthbox.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.